welcome back to VNVs. So as much as the Mori runs and drives quite happily, it's not really much fun. We get more clutch slip than we are tyre spin. So I've had a bit of a chat to my local clutch expert, and he says that we can throw an upgraded pressure plate in here and change all the springs out and keep it relatively standard. Now there's a couple of different options, apparently three. One of them, the classic old boys upgrade, would be to put in a Hillman Hunter clutch pack with pressure plate, which isn't really as apparently an ideal way to fix these problems, but they no longer exist and you can't buy them apparently. So unless you can track down a second-hand one, which then you're still using the old second-hand parts, not much use. Plan number two would be to pull everything out, re-drill the flywheel, and have it re-drilled to suit a 1275 or something else styled clutch pack with a diaphragm clutch, which is arguably not a bad idea. But then we're mixing and matching parts and things like that, which isn't really ideal. So I'm going to go with option number three, which he seems confident. Send it off to a chap down the line here somewhere and upgrade so reskim the surface, redo the clutch pack, and upgrade the springs in this one so it gives it a bit more bite. And I'm trying to track down a roller bearing, thrust bearing as well. So in the meantime, that might be our cheapest option to get this thing back on the road and having some fun. So in order to do that, instead of just pulling the gearbox out, I also need to address the leaky rear main seal. So we're going to pull out the engine and gearbox out of everything just because it's easier and I can get the whole thing on the bench and see what's going on. So we're going to start the clock. It is currently about 12:15 in the afternoon, and let's see how long we can take to pull this bad boy out again. Right, wish us luck. Okay, so anyone who hasn't taken the engine out of your Mori before, if you can take this front scuttle panel off, radiator panel, it is the godsend for you. So I've obviously had this off before, so you've got what's called the hockey sticks on the side. Undo the nuts inside the guard behind there. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4 bolts in the top, nut and bolt that go into the top of the guard. And on the bottom there's normally 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 little tiny annoying rusty as sin bolts that break as soon as you touch them. So I've taken those off obviously, and we've just got 2 on the bottom and the 4 on the top. So undo your radiator hoses, top and bottom, undo any wiring that's in there, which you shouldn't do unless you have an electric fan like I have. Those 2, and there's 3 nuts on the back of there. I've also had to replace those because they also broke before. So away we go. And then you can take this whole front panel off and then you get access to everything. Timing covers, engine mounts, the lot. So let's crack into that. We're going to drain the radiator first to get that draining out and then go from there. There you go. Alright. What a mess. We're puking gearbox oil, or puking coolant, but okay. All right. There we have it, everybody. Engine out, gearbox out. That made quite a mess. But, whoops. All clear. Now for on the fun part. Let's pull that apart and play with some clutches. Right. Alright, we're back. It's a new day. It's been a little while. We have a new plan. So, the original plan for the clutch was to rebuild this beautiful piece of work, and a clutch plate, and get that resurfaced. And get this put together with some new springs and stuff in it to make it all nice and tight. But, I don't know. My man Phil down at Key West seems to think that's not the better idea anymore. Loves to change his underwear far too often. So we've come up with a new plan. Now, obviously there's not too much out there to modify an 1100 Morris Minor. They all seem to be performance parts for 1275s for sprites and midgets and everything else. The plan to get the one from Australia was looking like it was going to be just about mortgage your house by the time I got it here. So we've come up with yet another new plan. So, after much measurement, once you bolt everything together, we've got another flywheel here and a clutch plate bolted together, and this face here sits, once you put it on a nice flat surface. Off the top of my head, I did measure this earlier. I feel like it was about 38 millimeters. That's in 39, but. And then you take into account the carbon thrust bearing that you have there. This one's actually slightly worn. So you want to get that height from where those pins sit to the face of the flywheel. The same distance. So I've been through and we've measured all that, and we've come up with a new plan. Get rid of all my spare bits and pieces. We've come up with a pretty in pink new plan. So, this is a heavy duty Ford Escort 1600 pressure plate by Exceedi, just out of interest. And it happens to have the same bolt pattern as the 1100 Morris Minor does, albeit it has 3 dowels instead of the 2 that we have on the Murray. But what I've been advised to do, which shouldn't be too much of an issue, is locate the 1 dowel, drop all your bolts in, and then you can drill through and spot your new dowels and tap those dowels in without any major issues. And once all that's bolted up, we've got a beautiful new little thrust bearing, which off the top of my head is nothing particularly special, but it is a roller thrust bearing, where instead of a carbon one, we've got a release bearing 38mm ID flat face. These 2 particular items cost me $440, so we're not really breaking the bank there. Was advised to purchase a new Morris Minor clutch plate. We're not actually going to do that. That's another couple of $100, which I'm like, yeah, you know what, I've got one here. We'll give it a go. And if it explodes, then at least we know the clutch is working and it's getting plenty of pressure. So I might as well get my money's worth out of it. And if we have to pull it out again, we have to pull it out again. Well, we're pretty well practiced at that now. So, the only issue we have is going from this thrust bearing and joining this roller thrust bearing together. So once this is all bolted together, that top face of the roller bearing plus the thrust plate, pressure plate onto the flywheel sits the same height. That one's not bolted down, so it won't be right. The same height as the face on here. So those 2 faces end up exactly the same, within a mil or so, I'm told. I think from memory, I think it was about a mil difference. So these end up sitting at the same height, which means everything will actually work how it's supposed to. So I'm going to take, I've made a rough drawing, I've made a few measurements. Amazing drawing skills there by a 5-year-old, but it works for me, I know what it means. I'm told we can just make basically a sleeve that will fit in between the two. This one will need to be somewhat slightly bored out. And we're going to skim the face. I'm just using an old one because that carbon face isn't really necessary. And also an old one has also got a carbon that's been used forever and it hasn't cracked and broken and fallen apart, like a lot of the brand new ones out of the box will have a habit of doing. So we're going to skim that back so it's flush with the casting. And we're going to bore that centre out to, I believe it was 38 millimetres for both of them. And then we're going to have a little, basically a pad in between to just take the weight. Here's actually a little slip bearing in there. I need a little bit of clearance between the two. So you'll have those two together, and all they have to do is locate on there and not fall off. It doesn't take any weight sideways, up and down. None of this spins. There's none of this. The only part that spins is that front bearing face. So that is the way forward. That is the next step. Is all I need to do is get that piece machined up. If anyone is interested, I will try and put together a better drawing, more accurate, if anyone needs to know, wants to have a go at it themselves. But it seems like a lot more affordable and potentially more efficient way of doing it. The combination of clutch plate, pressure plate and thrust bearing I was offered from one of the midget guys in Australia was going to come to about $1,500 New Zealand, not including the shipping or the taxes to get it here. So I think we're currently winning at the moment on our, probably coming around $500. I can't quite remember if I may or may not make this myself. I do have access to a lathe. I can't decide if I'm going to be lazy or not and just get the local guys to make it or not. We'll see how flush we're feeling on that day. But yeah, that's the way forward. So, the only thing to do now is I've got to relocate these dowels. I'm going to go through, lock all those bolts down, spot those through, drill them in the drill press, bang those in, and I can get my flywheel, clutch plate, pressure plate, everything back on again. And then I'll just be waiting on this piece. And then we can put it all back together and go and do some skids. Right, let's crack on. Right, this is a slightly better visual representation of what we've got. So, once everything's in play and everything's stacked together, and we drop in, they're both sitting on a nice flat surface, albeit this is to the back of the casting, but we've got 94.5 millimeters, and this one we've got 94.5 millimeters, and I'm actually going to machine off that little space in there, that carbon, and I'm going to make that gap about 6 millimeters, just to give us a bit of extra play, because these are obviously wear, well, they were made to wear, so the ones I've got aren't actually the full size. So if I was to replace one, we shouldn't need to, we should only need to potentially replace that bearing if need be, but there's enough adjustment in the clutch levers itself to be able to make this work, so that's slightly more accurate of what we want. Right, there you have it, the finished item. That bearing, which I can spin with one hand. Roller bearing is now attached to what used to be my thrust bearing, with a nice little sleeve, a couple of spacer in the middle, and let's go put it all together, see if it works, eh? Alright everybody, we're back in action again. We have the engine back in, we've got the gearbox in. I've hooked up the exhaust again, so I've got a new exhaust. I put some new wrap on it because other stuff's a bit ugly, and hopefully my new mufflers and everything, fingers crossed, are looking and sounding very cool. I'm kind of more nervous about the sound of the new exhaust than I am about this clutch working, but we've got a couple of little bits and pieces to play with, so I'm going to put you guys up here, and then we're going to crack on with a few bits and pieces, put it all back together again. So wish us luck, everybody. Should all go pretty smoothly. No, it's very quiet. What else is there going on? Alright, we're back. Back in the game. The engine is all back in again, and still got a few tuning issues to work with, but everything else seems like it'll work. So let's get you guys shut down. Clutch, albeit quite firm, you can't really tell by my pressing it. It is quite springy, quite firm. I don't think the light-hearted are going to be terribly enamoured with that, but we... Oops, gotta close the door. I'll take it off. Now, clutch does grab quite nicely, albeit the engine is not very happy. And forward. That grabs, and we'll do the trick. Now we would go for a bit of a test drive, but we've got, for starters, the windscreen wipers have decided to give up the ghost, and it's kind of wet outside. And we've got that. We have managed to acquire a rather large rear main seal leak, but in the grand scheme of things, the exhaust not terrible, a little bit obnoxious, but it's a little hard to see. But let's go back up on the stands. So we've got a little dump pipe here coming out 2¼ up under here. We've got a nice big muffler in the back, and I've got the other one through on the passenger side where the original one ran, 2¼ inch. So it's not too obnoxious when it's sitting here idling. It does get a bit rowdy when you get up on the revs, but that's us. Clutch successful. Few other problems now to deal with. So unfortunately, I think that whole gearbox is going to come out again. We're going to redo the rear main again, and we also, in my great geniusness, have managed to I forgot to weld in my O2 sensor bung for my fuel mixture gauge, so we'll have to pull that off again, and we've definitely got some more tuning issues to deal with. So at some stage I might do some more reading, and we might do some more videos, and we'll do a bit more tuning on the SU. Now, I've watched done a little bit of reading myself, and I've got a few bits and pieces together. We've got to get some different jets and some different springs. We'll probably get the old GoPro camera in there, see if we can figure out a few things, because it's a lot easier to see what's going on with the wonders of technology. But in the meantime, that'll wrap us up for today, and we're back on the road somewhat, being used as ute things, but that's another adventure for another day and another video. So thanks very much, everybody. Signing off. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Hopefully we can get a few more subscribers. I can do a few more videos, and maybe, just maybe one day, we can get some money back, and I won't just be selling coffees to fund all this Morris Minor madness. Anyway, see you later, guys. Until next time.